In this video lesson, we're going to have a look at mixed cell referencing. Mixed cell referencing is a mixture of two types of cell referencing that you should already be aware of, relative and absolute. And in explaining how we use mixed cell referencing, I'll briefly talk about the relative and absolute cell referencing. Okay, so we've got a worksheet set up. I'm making some investments and there's various rates of return. And I just want to find out how much I will get back for each amount of investment for each different type of interest rate. So basically we're multiplying together these figures. To work out what my 2% return would be on £5,000, I need to put a formula inside cell B4. Simple formula just to multiply those two cells together. So it equals A4 multiplied by B3, B3 even. Okay, we'll make that happen. And it's £100. So if I invest £5,000 at 2% interest rate, I'll earn £100. Not strictly true, but good enough for what we're doing here. Okay. We know that once we've got a function or a formula in our spreadsheet, we can use the autofill handle to replicate that. So I can replicate it down and then replicate it across, and there's all my answers that don't look very good. Okay, let's investigate this and find out why. So we started off with A4 times B3. If I then replicate that across into the C column, let's see what happens. A4 times B3 becomes B4 times C3. So in other words, the A4 has changed to B4. That's called relative cell referencing. Now behind the scenes, what Excel is actually doing is saying in this function here, in this formula here, it says take the contents of the cell 1 to my left, blue one, and multiply it by 1 above me. That's A4 times B3, 1 to the left, 1 above. It's relative to its position. So if I choose another formula, it does exactly the same thing. 1 to my left, 1 above. 1 to the left, 1 above. 1 to the left, 1 above. Even down here. 1 to the left, 1 above. And that's why in this instance, relative cell referencing doesn't work. Because in this cell here, it's now taking the contents of B4, not as we wanted, the contents of A4. We wanted to multiply A4 by 4%, and instead we're multiplying this cell by 4%. That's why relative cell referencing doesn't work. Aha! Now, we know that though, don't we? Because we've worked with absolute cell references. So it must be an absolute cell reference we need. Let's try that again with absolute cell references. Equals A4. Now for absolute cell references, we use the don't we, to lock things. Now you can type the dollar signs in, or you can just press the F4 key and it converts your relative cell reference to an absolute cell reference. So we've got an absolute cell reference for A4 multiplied by B3, make that absolute by pressing the F4 key and make that happen. This is going to be better. We'll replicate that across and then replicate it down. And oh, that doesn't look right either, does it? No, because when we click in each cell, every single one of them is A4 times B3. A4 times B3. That's because we made the cell references absolute. That locks it in the position. The dollar sign means when you use the autofill, do not change me. You must absolutely stay at A4 times B3. So that doesn't work either. What we actually need is a hybrid between the two. Mixed cell references. So let's have a look again. Third time lucky. Start with the equal sign. We know we want to sell A4. Now we'll just focus on A4 for the moment. If I were to replicate that down, A4 would become A5. Then it would become A6. Is that correct? Just think about it. Yes, it is. It's going down this line. A4 becomes 5, becomes 6, becomes 7. So when I replicate it down, having the A there is fine. That's not a problem at all. What happens to the 4? Well, the 4 becomes 5, and then it becomes 6. Absolutely fine. So as it is at the moment, replicating that down, the A4 will be fine. It'll become A5, A6, A7. What happens if we replicate it across? The A4 will become B4. Well, we don't want it to be B4. We still want it to be A4. So what we need to do is lock the A, but not the 4. Why not the 4? Because when we replicate down, we want it to change to 5, 6, 7. When we replicate across, it's fine if it stays 4. It's always row 4. So we don't need to do anything with the 4. It's just the A. Now, remember that key I told you about, F4? Well, if you press that again, it changes it to absolute, as I already mentioned. But pressing it again changes it to a mixed cell reference. $4, press again, $A4, press again, back to a relative cell reference. So we can use that F4 key to toggle through the different types of cell referencing. So what we want for this case is not absolute. We want it mixed, but we don't want to lock the 4, which is what the $ does. We want to lock the A. $4. When we replicate that down, it'll be A5, A6, A7, $A8, $A9. Replicate it across, it'll be $A4, $A5, $A6, etc. Let's just see what that looks like and actually do it. So we got $A4. If I replicate that down, $A4, $A5, $A6, $A7. Each time he's getting the right cell. When we replicate that across, further, we've got $A4, 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 $A4. Each time it's still that cell. So using that $A4, whether we replicate down or across, every time we pick up the investment value. Okay. Just delete that. So we've worked out that the first part of our formula needs to be equals $A4 multiplied by B3. Now let's have the same kind of reasoning. As we replicate this down, B3 will become B4, will then become B5. Do we want that? No. We want it to stay at B3. So we've got to lock the 3 this time. So let's just press the F4 key to get that $3. Does that work? Down, it becomes $3. Down, $3. Down, $3. Replicate across, the $3 becomes $C3 because the B is not locked. So $3 becomes $C3, becomes $D3. This is looking useful. Let's replicate it and see what happens. Replicate that down. And what have we got? Figures are looking good. Let's just click in a few cells. This one here, A6, yeah, the investment multiplied by C3, the interest rate. A8, yeah, multiplied by the investment rate. So using that mixed cell reference allows us to pick up the investment and the interest rate correctly each time. So that's mixed cell referencing. Using the $ to lock the cell reference so that when we replicate, either the column or the row reference doesn't change.